Health Secretary standing by for us this morning. Good to see you as always, Mr. Streeting. How desperate is the situation in the Lebanon for Brits?
It is extremely serious, Kay, and the government is being unequivocal about this. British citizens in Lebanon need to leave and need to leave now. There are still commercial flights departing the country. They should put themselves on those flights. Our military stands ready to assist with any necessary evacuation, but this is extremely serious, and we've been concerned about the escalation between Israel and Lebanon for some time. The Prime Minister, the Foreign Secretary, the Defence Secretary have been active over the summer and right into now the autumn to try and urge both Israel and Lebanon to de-escalate. And today the Prime Minister is sending a very clear message at the United Nations that they've got to step back from the brink. So it's incredibly serious.
Dunkirk-style rescue for up to 10,000 Brits?
Well, the most important message today is that those British citizens who are in Lebanon need to leave and need to leave now. Commercial flights are available. Of course, contingency planning has been well underway for some time for military evacuation, but we don't want people to be in that situation. And I think people should think very carefully about how desperate that situation may look and feel were this to escalate further than it already has. So the time to leave is now. Commercial flights are available. British citizens should get themselves on those flights and out of Lebanon immediately.
OK, but just to clarify, there are hundreds of UK troops that have been deployed into the Mediterranean that will bring Brits out by sea if it comes to it.
The Defence Secretary has been working with our military leaders to make sure that they're ready to assist if an evacuation becomes necessary.
OK. Are you expecting international air corridors to be closed?
Well, let's see what happens, Kay. I think we've seen a clear international leadership, not just from our Prime Minister, but other international leaders who are working actively to try and de-escalate the situation. So I don't want to speculate on what may happen. What I do want to do is to just re-emphasise what the Prime Minister has already said and what he will set out today at the United Nations, which is Israel and Lebanon must step back from the brink and de-escalate.
OK. Yesterday, in his speech, the Prime Minister claimed that every pensioner would be better off under Labour. Of course, they would have been more better off under the Tories because they wouldn't have got rid of the winter fuel payments and would have still kept the triple lock.
Well, I don't accept that, Kay, because the Conservatives left a £22 billion hole in the public finances. They weren't straight with the British people ahead of the general election. They were spending like there was no tomorrow because I think they were assuming that for the Conservative government there was no tomorrow. So they were spending recklessly, hoping that would carry them through the general election. And now this Labour government is picking up the pieces. That does mean difficult choices. On winter fuel allowance, there'll be other difficult choices to come too. But because the Chancellor has protected the triple lock, even after the decision she's taken on the winter fuel allowance, pensioners will still be better off this winter than they were last winter and will be better off next year further still because we are determined to protect pensioners' incomes and align them with living standards. And that's the right thing to do.
Yeah, but they still would have been better off under the Tories because the Tories, in their manifesto, said they were keeping the triple lock and they would have kept the winter fuel payment.
But I think the Conservative manifesto was fundamentally dishonest. They didn't set out in their manifesto how they would pay for new commitments. And we now know that within the existing financial year, they were spending like there was no tomorrow. So eventually we would have all been stung with the bill because there is a cost to be paid with higher borrowing, with reckless management of the public finances. We saw that writ large with Liz Truss. I think what we didn't expect was that Rishi Sunak and Jeremy Hunt would be almost as irresponsible. And I think they should apologise, frankly.
OK, so we should be applauding this government for deciding to keep a triple lock policy, that it was the Conservatives or a coalition government that brought it in.
Well, we committed to protect the triple lock in our manifesto, and we're getting on with the job. We don't expect lots of applause as we take difficult choices, but I think what the Prime Minister did in his speech yesterday was spell out very clearly why, by fixing the foundations, we can build a brighter future for our country. And within that vision and within that honesty lies the hope of a better future. We've seen where short-termism, where sticking plasters, where government by gimmick gets us, and people have had enough of it. And the bits of the Prime Minister's speech I was most proud of was where he spelled out the choices and the trade-offs that are involved in building a brighter future for our country, because we haven't had that kind of leadership for some time.
2.8 million people are out of work because of ill health. Are you content that they should all be claiming benefits?
No, and today in my speech as the Health and Social Care Secretary, I'll be setting out our plans to get Britain not just back to health, but back to work. You're right, there are nearly 3 million people in our country who are off work because they're off sick. And we owe it to them to get them not just back to health, but back to work. That's why, as we deliver our 40,000 new appointments every week, as we promised in our manifesto, we will also be sending crack teams of top clinicians who have showed us how reformed ways of working can get through the backlog faster. We'll be sending those clinicians to the areas with the highest levels of people who are off work, off sick. So that way we get the double whammy of not just getting those waiting lists down, but also getting unemployment and economic inactivity down. So it's good for the nation's health, but also good for the nation's economy as well, because a healthy nation is a healthy economy, and a healthy economy helps to drive a healthy nation. The two issues are linked. OK,
so if some of these people are claiming benefits and they shouldn't be, are you questioning their motivation?
Well, look, where people are off ill and they are unable to work, the social security system is available, and it's up to us to make sure that we get them back to health and back to work quickly. Where people are fraudulently claiming benefits, that's a different kettle of fish, and people shouldn't be doing that, and we're not going to tolerate it, which is why in her speech and through her work as the Work and Pensions Secretary, Liz Kendall will be clear, as has the Prime Minister, that we've got to reduce the benefits bill. And of course, part of that is tackling fraud, but part of that is also about recognising that the failure of the previous government means that the NHS hasn't always been there for people when they need it. And we owe it to them to get them back to health and back to work, and that's exactly what we'll do.
OK, lots of speaking. Where's the strategy, some might say? Yesterday, the leader told us about more prisons, more power lines, saving sausages. When we'll know the timeline on how you're going to make Britain great again?
Well, by the next general election, waiting lists will be demonstrably lower, because I know that's how I will be judged, how the Prime Minister will be judged, how the government will be judged. And look, people will judge us by our actions, not just our words ultimately. But look at what I did as the Health and Social Care Secretary within my first weeks in office. I took action to implement the junk food ad ban targeted kids, took action to employ 1,000 more GPs onto the front line because they found themselves bizarrely unemployed at the same time as patients are unable to find a GP. So that's making a real impact as those GPs get onto the front line. And of course, took action within 3 weeks to do something the Conservatives failed to do in 18 months, which was to end the junior doctors dispute.
Will you be banning smoking?
And we definitely want to. We definitely want to see. We definitely want to see smoking phased out in our country. We committed to that in our manifestos. So we want to make sure this generation of children are the healthiest generation that ever lived, and therefore they will never be able to legally buy cigarettes. We are looking at a range of other measures to also help people who are currently smoking to quit, and also to deal with the scourge of second-hand smoke and passive smoking, which is also harmful. We'll be setting out our proposals on that shortly.
Will you be banning smoking outside pubs?
Look, that's one of the measures that I'm considering, and I'm up for a national debate on this issue, because we've got to do two things, as I'll be setting out in my speech today: reform the health service, but also reform public health, because we might be living longer, but we're becoming sicker sooner. And there is a heavy price being paid for that in our economy, our public finances, and in our own healthy lives.
OK, now we heard about the slip of the tongue, which I saw you ignored when I mentioned it from the leader a little bit earlier on. But what about your comments about describing the First Party conference in government for 15 years as feeling like having a warm bath among friends?
Oh, no.
What?
I was just about to say in relation to my boss, there but for the grace of God go I, but as you have already clearly been tipped off, I may have inadvertently used the metaphor that I immediately regretted, not least because I was sat next to my friend and colleague, the Science Secretary, Peter Kyle, who enjoyed absolutely ripping it out of me. So,
when was the last time you had a warm bath among friends?
I can't believe I'm having to say this. Kay, I can tell you categorically, I've never had a warm bath among friends.
Have you got your own
I can actually hear my team laughing off camera. Thanks, Kay. Really appreciate it.
Final question. Do you have your own personal photographer paid for by the taxpayer?
No, I don't. I think the department's got a comms team and there's a photographer I see popping by. But no, I don't have a personal photographer.
OK. I was going to ask you finally how you feel about sausages, but I'm not going to. It's good to see you. Thank you very much indeed for joining us on the programme this morning. Thank you.
Thanks, Kay.